Ukraine attacked a number of critical facilities in Russia. On the night of October 19, the armed forces of Ukraine attacked the Novokuybishevsk oil refinery in the Samara region, which can process almost 5 million tons of oil annually and produces more than 20 types of oil products. The military hit the primary oil processing unit, which immediately caught fire. And this is even more painful for Russia. Explosions also occurred at one of Russia's largest gas processing plants. This is the Orenburg gas processing plant, located 1,500 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. It has been confirmed that a strike hit the processing unit and the gas purification unit, causing a large-scale fire. This gas processing plant can process 45 billion cubic meters of natural gas per year. And here is the key news. After the strike on Orenburg, gas intake from Kazakhstan has been suspended. As you understand, this is no longer just a domestic Russian issue. This is a breach at the interstate junction. And today, fresh satellite images of Feodosia appeared, showing rows of burnt-out tanks, as if a firestorm had swept through the oil terminal. Now, how this is presented matters. In the international media, right after Putin's call to Donald Trump, there was a statement claiming that the strategic initiative in this war is supposedly on Russia's side. My name is Alexei Pechi. Today is October 19th. Let's go through everything step by step. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel. Leave a like, write any comment, and subscribe to the Pechi News Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. It says there, support Alexei Pechi's channel. Choose any format that is convenient for you. I will be grateful for any support you give. Let's go through everything step by step, starting with the Novokuybishevsk oil refinery owned by Rosneft. And so local public pages are posting videos of a huge multi-story blaze. The governor quickly explains about the downed drones, and at the same time admits there are disruptions with flights at the local airport and problems with communication. And here's an interesting point. When the refinery is on fire, no statements from Russian officials claiming there's supposedly no damage work anymore. The image speaks for itself, and this image shows that the depth of the rear is gone. Somewhere far away in Russia, yet another oil refinery is burning like a torch. And even a Russian can no longer be convinced that this is just some smoke, as they used to call it. All drones were shot down. With its strike, Ukraine is showing a simple idea. Distance is no longer armor. Distance will no longer protect you. And this really changes the psychology of the war inside Russia itself. Next is Crimea, the Feodosia oil terminal, the very hub that supplied the occupation logistics in southern Ukraine. And satellites counted black gaps where there used to be white tanks. And as a result, the destruction of 11 tanks has been confirmed. These are volumes not for a day, not for a week. This will take months to repair, and an attempt to survive by relying on small petroleum deliveries to the occupied peninsula. And Ukrainian international media platforms have analyzed the photo down to the last pixel. And this is an important detail because the conversation is no longer about whether it hit or not, it's about specifics. How many tanks burned, how many are left, and of those that remain, how long will they last? Why is this strategic? Because the war runs on fuel. Tanks, drones, diesel generators, ammunition logistics, all of this won't work without gasoline and kerosene. And when major facilities far from the front are taken out, the supply lines get longer, a liter of gasoline becomes more expensive, and the pace of any offensive slows down. It's simple arithmetic, unpleasant for Russians. So, minus the reservoirs in Feodosia, plus extra kilometers for trucks with tankers over the Crimean bridge, and on the other hand, minus gas intake in Orenburg. The Kremlin is also more anxious in talks with neighbors and faces extra repair costs. As a result, the Russian machine starts, coughing not along the line of contact, but in its own rear. And there's also the so-called media layer to this story. Because when the world's largest media outlets, like Reuters or Associated Press, come out with headlines about a strike on the largest gas plant in Russia, or about the suspension of gas intake from Kazakhstan. This immediately affects not just the information space but also insurance and port risks. Carriers and insurers. They don't read military reports, they read statements. And here, a non-obvious consequence of such attacks is revealed. For carriers and insurers, only one thing matters. The risk of gas supplies through Russia has increased. Accordingly, the price has gone up, which means the discount from Russia should be bigger. Like, listen, if we're going to take the risk of transporting gas through Russia, then it should be done in a way that's profitable. And for Moscow, that's exactly like the lifeblood of the state budget, which is already in short supply. And that explains why such a blow isn't just for show, it's actually an economic pit that's only getting deeper. Well, that's not all. Here, it's worth paying close attention to the geography of the strikes, because it's not just a series of random hits, it's a chain of attacks. Before this, let me remind you, Ukraine was targeting oil refineries in Kuban, then, for example, there was a strike on Ust-Luga, and now it's Samara and even deep inside Russia's gas system, on the Orenburg gas processing plant. In Crimea, they're destroying terminals so that the fleet and the land are basically left on a diet over the long distance. This changes behavior because the Russians' air defense gets stretched thin, repair crews can't keep up, oil refineries get overloaded, and exports suffer. Accordingly, there's much less money. From the outside, it might look like isolated fires. Something caught fire here, chaos there. But from inside Russia, it's a constant shortage of fuel for tomorrow's tasks. That's great news. Also, pay close attention to the geography. You can actually track even those supply chains that the Russians are using. You can track them by the strikes of Ukrainian drones. Of course, Russian propaganda tried to play the usual game, claiming that everything is under control. The damage is minimal. But, when a neighboring country, not some Russian officials, but a neighboring country, officially confirms the suspension of gas intake, it's not really possible anymore to pretend that this is just some kind of local fire. What are we talking about? The thing is, after the attack by Ukrainian drones, the Orenburg plant of Gazprom stopped receiving gas from Kazakhstan. According to Kazakhstan's Ministry of Energy, Gazprom confirmed the emergency situation at this plant on the night of October 19. Because of this, the intake of raw gas from the Karachaganak field was temporarily stopped. Moreover, Kazakhstan's Ministry of Energy writes, quote, "Information about the nature of the damage and the timeline for resuming the plant's operations has not yet been provided by the Russian side, but Kazakhstan's gas supply has not been disrupted." And now an important detail. The Orenburg gas processing plant is located 1,500 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. A hit was recorded and recovery began, but after gas processing and purification, a large fire broke out. And here's another picture for you. Now, the reputation of the Orenburg gas processing plant has suffered. What does this mean? Listen, fear among investors and partners is very simple. They see a hole. Accordingly, risk is immediately factored into the price. And if there's risk in the price, then demand new discounts from Russia to cover those risks. And in the end, Ukraine has found a language that even the Kremlin understands. It's the language of fires at critical infrastructure. And while Russian officials like Ushakov, Peskov, Lavrov, and even Putin publicly argue about meetings in Budapest with Trump in 2 weeks, while they're discussing some kind of peace formulas, whether to give up Donbas or not, on the ground, completely different formulas are being decided, What's the daily processing capacity in tons? What detour is there now after the strikes on Feodosia? And where can we find people for repairs if a new site catches fire tomorrow? And this is the unpleasant reality for those Russians who talked about invulnerability, saying that Russia is so big you can't reach everywhere. And this is the reality that makes the Russian war more expensive every day. Yes, in Russian press releases they gently call it a fire. Everything is a fire. Before it was called smoke, now for them it's a fire. Of course, they call it a direct hit, but the meaning doesn't change. A major technological facility is failing. In Kazakhstan, they confirm that working with Russians is inconvenient. So the news isn't just about some unit burning at a gas processing plant. It's news about the breakdown of what's called a long and very expensive hand of trust. And here, every verbal trick about it being a local issue becomes meaningless. Meanwhile, news from Samara reports the Novokubishevsk refinery is burning so intensely that smoke is visible across the city. By the way, people are posting videos online showing just massive flames. Of course, there are interruptions being reported. In the comments, Russians seem a bit confused. They're writing, "Where is the air defense? Where is our anti-aircraft defense? Putin recently said we would strengthen it, and this is how. Even Tomahawks won't scare us." Ultimately, ordinary drones are scary. So, when the refinery is burning, the question is no longer just a meme, for Russians. Where is our air defense? They start getting scared. It already sounds like a verdict. And the most unpleasant thing for the Kremlin is, of course, the synergy in this whole situation. First, there's such a deep blow to gas and oil refining. Then, a sort of counter of international publications appears, where the fact is recorded carefully, but without euphemism. Ukraine has stepped up attacks on Russia's energy targets. This is what Reuters writes, when at the same time details about the Orenburg complex come up, and it's one of the largest in the world, isn't it? Any effort to downplay the issue clashes with the scale of this tragedy for Russians. This isn't just a small plant, it's the heart of the system, a massive complex that suddenly caught fire. And here's the contrast for you. Because earlier, just a few days before, Putin was telling Trump that Russia still has a strategic advantage in this war. The following day, oil refineries in his country are burning again. This is the kind of pressure the Kremlin faces. Well, it's the most painful of all. It's a long, methodical process that takes away predictability where the front is holding, and it's held together by fuel, by money, by the trust of counterparties who unfortunately are still cooperating with the Russians. And so Feodosia, Orenburg, and Samara, these are not three separate stories, they're one chain. And with this logic, Ukraine is doing the only right thing, striking at the fuel tank of the war. While at the tables, there are talks about meetings in 2 weeks in Budapest. The world's image is sober and simple. Fire and blazes are tools, even those who won't listen can hear. Well, that's why this is the picture of this war today. I'll put an ellipsis here. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Bye, everyone.